If you recall last Sunday, I told you I could tell you your future. I knew exactly what was going to happen to you. And I then told you what's going to happen to all of us, right? It is inevitable that if we live long enough, we're going to die, right? This morning, instead of talking, though, about death after life, I want to talk about life after death. Job, chapter 14. I've borrowed my title from a book by Erwin Lutzer. And that's based off a sermon series that he preached at the Moody Church in Chicago, where he's talking about what happens. You know, the more loved ones we have to pass away, and perhaps the closer those loved ones are to us, the more interested we are in what happens to us after we die. We begin to wonder, you know, where are they? Or can they see what's going on down here? Are they aware of what we're going through and what exactly what is going on right now? And that is just human nature for us to wonder about those kinds of things. And so we wonder, and there are many different things. And the reason I want to deal with this is because there's 4 different reasons I want us to talk about this today. This is not just to satisfy our curiosity that we would like to know how can we know what happens after death. But it's essential for our comfort. Even the Apostle Paul, when he was writing to the Thessalonians and gave that great passage that talks about that Jesus is going to come back and the archangel is going to shout and there's going to be the sound of the trumpet and the dead in Christ are going to rise and then we're going to be caught up in the air to meet him. And all those things, he says the reason he gave them that information that the Lord had revealed to him was because he says, comfort one another with these words. It wasn't just a doctrine for them to know. It was really said, we have a solid hope. Remember what we've talked about in studying Peter on Wednesday nights, that because of the new birth, because we've been born again in Christ, we have a living hope. We have a hope that is alive. And so we need to comfort ourselves with that. We don't have to grieve like those who have no hope, but because we have a sure and living hope, as the book of Hebrews describes, like an anchor for the soul that can be our hold and can give us strength when we need it. I think we also need to have this knowledge that we're going to be talking about what happens to us after we die, just for our own courage. You know, we're all going to face the end of life. It's going to happen. And the natural human reaction is to fear the unknown. And so if we have no concept, if we think it all of a sudden it's, one man described it, he said, can you imagine, this is how he described one philosopher who didn't have faith. He says he described the end of life as people who are going across a bridge and it's a whole mass of people, or just kind of pushing each other along on this bridge, and you don't really realize until you get out there that the bridge is only half done. It just falls off at the end, but you can't come back, and you're just pushed until you fall off. Well, if you really think that death is like that, you're not going to want to die, right? Which is so much different from the way that the Apostle Paul approached death, where he said, for me to die would be better. I mean, I would rather go and be with Jesus. He says, I realize there's still things I need to do here, and so I believe I'm going to stay longer. But for me, because for me to live is Christ, but to die is gain. I would much prefer. Death is actually something I'm looking forward to because of what I know is on the other side. So we need to know what happens afterwards. We need it for comfort and for courage, and we need it then so that we can correct other people. I mean, there's a lot of people that have some really strange ideas. We're going to get into some of those this morning, but you know, there's some really bad ideas that are going around out there that really confuse people, and we can help clear up some of that confusion and put people in a positive direction if we're informed. If we know what we believe and why we believe it and why the basis for why we believe it, then we can help other people in the same way. And so we need to help clear up some of the uncertainty that is in this world. Because I remember I was reading some popular philosopher recently who said that the greatest misery in the world is uncertainty. Uncertainty. Most of us can work ourselves up into a ditch over making decisions when we don't know how they're going to turn out, and we're uncertain. Sheila will probably confirm what I'm going to tell you now, is that we hardly ever take a vacation because I don't like to go places where we've never been. Does that make any sense to you? Some of you guys will understand what I'm talking about, right? You know? I will tell you this, the best vacations we've ever been on was when there was a guy at First Baptist Church Pittsburgh who planned the tour, and we went with a group, and he knew where everything, he told us exactly what we had, when to show up. All the tickets had already been bought, all the transportation had all been arranged, all the tips had already been paid. I mean, we just had, it was wonderful, But I don't like to go where I don't know, if I stop at that restaurant, is that really the good restaurant to stop at? If I stop at that hotel, is that really the good hotel to stay in? And we have spent miserable hours driving home from West Virginia or Florida or someplace like this, because I will look up, I'll say, well, maybe that's a good hotel we could stay in this, The people who have vacations, I'm a Facebook friend with a person who just this week went to Disney World with her kids, and every day they had a list of activities that they had done that was as long as your arm. You know what? Some people are really good at planning vacations. They've got it all figured out before they get, not me. And so it's a miserable thing to go, not knowing whether you know the best route to get there, or the places to stop. Of course, if you're with me, you're not going to stop anyway. But anyway, uncertainty is misery. We don't need to live like that when we can know what's going to happen. And we can then console others in the time that they are in trouble themselves. Apostle Paul said, if in this life only we have hope, we are of all men most miserable. So we need to know exactly what we believe. There are a lot of ideas around that talk to us about what happens to a person. I want to look at this passage from Job in Job chapter 14. It really would help to give a little context. So let's start in verse 7 and see what Job is saying here. And this is one of the times when Job is answering to his critics. He says, there's hope for a tree. There's hope for a tree. If it's cut down, that it will sprout again, and that its tender shoots will not cease. Though its root may grow old in the earth, and its stump may die in the ground, yet at the scent of water it will bud and bring forth branches like a plant. You see the picture he's painting there. Tree's been cut down. There's a distinct possibility that because of the root system, that eventually that stump will flourish again. There's hope for a tree. But, verse 10, but man dies and is laid away. Indeed, he breathes his last. And where is he? Where is he? As water disappears from the sea and a river becomes parched and dries up, So man lies down and does not rise till the heavens are no more. They will not awake nor be roused from their sleep. Oh, that you would hide me in the grave, that you would conceal me until your wrath is past, that you would appoint me a set time and remember me. If a man dies, shall he live again? That's the question in it. If a man dies, shall he live again? There are those who would say, no, that this is it. Of course, others are going to say, let me start first of all with this, that some people are going to say, well, we can't know. Nobody knows. I mean, in Shakespeare's soliloquy in the To Be or Not to Be in Hamlet, he calls death the undiscovered country, which became a title for a Star Trek movie later on for you Trekkies. But the idea is that, death, beyond death is unknown, and it's unknowable. There's nobody out there who could tell us because nobody survives death. Nobody survives death. Now, there's been a lot of interest recently in studying what we call near-death experiences, and people can sometimes write bestsellers, whether it's 90 Minutes in Heaven from the man who was in a car accident and was supposedly dead for 90 minutes and came back to life, or the little boy who went and went to heaven and came back talking about his grandfather that he met and had all those descriptions. There's been a fascination in our lifetime with what's called near-death experiences and what people can tell us what they experienced and what they can tell us about what's beyond. But the critics would say they can't really tell us what's beyond death because they were never really truly dead, because when you're truly dead, you don't come back. So they may have, and there's lots of explanations. That's oxygen deprivation, or it's, they've got all these, that's just the brain working. Some awfully interesting things explained about that. I mean, you are aware that there have been, in certain areas, there have been hospitals who in their hospital rooms have put things high up on shelves and written things on those things that they've got up there out of reach of something. And people who have died and have watched themselves dying out of the body could actually tell people when they came back what was written on those things that were up there. Those are things that have been documented, that those kinds of things have happened. People who could describe all the efforts the doctors were going through to resuscitate them, and what one doctor said to another, and what their loved ones were sometimes out in the waiting room, what was going on out there. And they saw all those things because they were out of the body at that time. But yet, when they came back, did they experience the real thing? We don't know, do we? And so a lot of people say, we really can't know what's on the other side. But apparently the people who say that have never read their Bibles, because the Bible does tell us about it. Well, like I started to say, other people would say that there's nothing beyond this life. So that, they just say, well, there's nothing to know, because once it's over, it's over. Once the fat lady sings, you're done. And so there's nothing beyond this life. We're just a collection of atoms, and when we die, the brain ceases to function. There's no mind work anymore, and so that's just the end of life. That there is nothing beyond this. It's just oblivion. We're terminated. We're done with. Unfortunately, there's three things. Let me just say this quickly. There's three things that say that can't be true. Number one, just think about all of the cultures and all the people groups that they have lived all throughout history, and they have all had a belief about what happens after death. The Egyptian pyramids, right? All the things that they would include that a person supposedly is going to need in an afterlife. Where did that idea come from, that there is an afterlife? Or Native Americans who would bury their dead with certain war implements and things like that. Every civilization, every tribe has come down and all of them have a view of life after death. Well, where did that come from? If there is no life after death, you're actually saying you're contradicting centuries of civilization and man's teaching from one generation to another. And then not only do you have to ignore what history tells us, you have to ignore the moral argument, which lets us know that there's a lot of unfair things. There's a lot of wicked things that happen in this world that never are dealt with, right? There's just something in us who thinks, there are some people who need to get their comeuppance, and they don't get it in this life. There's not all debts are paid in this life. Not all of the scales are completely balanced. There are people who have lived oppressing other people, who have taken advantage of others. They've killed people and done horrible things, and yet never supposedly seem to have to pay for it. And other people who suffered terribly, and they've never been recompensed for that. If there is no judgment at the end, if there is no accountability at the end, if there's no putting things right at the end, it just really goes against our grain. We can sense within ourselves that morally there has to be something after this life that's going to balance things out to where wrongs are going to be righted and suffering is going to be compensated. Don't you agree? I mean, that's just something we sense in our bones. And so you have to go against that moral sense that we have. And if there's nothing beyond this life, it doesn't make... You can't make sense of who we are as human beings. I sometimes say this is the psychological argument, or the idea is that mankind has been made with so much ability. There's so much giftedness in us that it seems like we are capable of so much that none of us realize our potential in this life. And so there's just this sense that we were made for more than just this one lifespan. The writer of Ecclesiastes puts it in this sense. He says, God has put eternity in men's hearts. There's something that lets us know that what we're doing here is really going to have more. If there's not a life beyond this one, then all of this life is just meaningless. We just spend a few years here and everything we've accomplished goes to nothing. But we have this sense that we were made for more than that. If God truly made us in His image, then some of that has to do with a life that is longer than just this lifespan. So there's got to be, we just sense that there's got to be something beyond this life. But what is it? What really happens to us the moment after the heart quits beating and the breath, we stop breathing and the brain activity is no longer detectable on any of our gadgets? What happens to us at that moment? Well, in case I lose my way right here, I'm going to go ahead and give you the conclusion now and tell you some other things. The Bible, to me, the Bible is very, very clear when it says to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. That's that verse that was on the title up there of 2 Corinthians chapter 5. If you want to look at that verse, those verses for just a minute. 2 Corinthians chapter 5. I'm going to start with verse, if I can read with my glasses on, verse 6. The Apostle Paul, writing, says, we are always confident, knowing that while we are at home in the body, we are absent from the Lord. Now, Paul knows that the Lord's with us. The Spirit is with us all the time. And he's just saying we're not visibly in his presence. Okay? So if we're in the body, we're not in heaven yet, right? So we're not in his presence. But to be absent from we're to be at home in the body is to be absent from the Lord. For we walk by faith, not by sight. But we are confident, he says again. We are confident, yes, and well pleased, rather to be absent from the body and to be present with the Lord. So the main thing I want us to know is those of us who are in Christ, those of us in whom Christ lives also, if we're one with Christ, to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. There's a passage in John 14 that is used so often at funeral services where Jesus says, "Let not your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again to receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also." John 14, 1 through 3. Jesus, I will come, and that where I am, there you may be. Now, I think that is a definite promise about Jesus' second coming. He's gonna come again, and we're going to talk about that hopefully in coming weeks. But I believe in many sense that can also be true of the fact that he comes for us when we die. Because he says, I want you to be where I am. Do you remember when Jesus died on the cross? There were two thieves, one on either side, right? And one of them had bad things to say to Jesus and persisted in saying it to the end. But one of the thieves eventually said, we shouldn't talk like that because we're getting what we deserve, but this man is suffering innocently. And then the thief turned to Jesus and said, Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom. To which Jesus replied, and I bet we all remember the words, today you will be with me in paradise. Today you will be with me in paradise. Now, paradise was the word that when they translated the Old Testament from Hebrew to Greek, when they described the Garden of Eden, instead of using a word for garden, they put the word for paradise there. So in Genesis 2, when it says God prepared a garden, it actually says that God prepared a paradise. A paradise comes from a Persian word that describes a walled, cultivated area. In other words, a park, like with a fence around it. And it is meant as a place where you could be and with people and have fellowship and just enjoy the beauty of nature. It was that's what a paradise was. Well, do you remember that the same thing, that same word, paradise, then shows up in the last book of the Bible. When Jesus is talking to the church at Ephesus, and that's the church that had lost its first love or had left its first love, and tells them to come back. Jesus says to that church, he who has an ear to hear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To him who overcomes, I will give to eat from the tree of life. Where was the tree of life? In the Garden of Eden, right? Shows up at the end too, right? Over in those last chapters of the book of Revelation, the tree of life is going to be in the New Jerusalem, right? So I will give to eat from the tree of life, which is in the midst of the paradise of God. So if Jesus says, today you will be with me in paradise, where were they? They weren't, he wasn't saying, you're going to sleep in the ground for thousands of years, like some people teach. They have a thing called soul sleep, that you're going to have to be in soul sleep. You're just like you've gone to sleep. You're not aware of what's going on. You're completely unconscious. You're completely unresponsive. And so they just believe that the body sleeps until, and the person sleeps until the resurrection comes and Jesus comes to wake them up. Seventh-day Adventists and a bunch of others believe that. Jehovah's Witnesses believe that. And they take it from the fact that the Bible so often refers to death as sleep. But it's just a figure. It's just, even, we should get that because Jesus, when he told his disciples, Lazarus is sleeping, remember chapter 11 in John? He finally had to tell them, no, he's dead. You know, I'm trying to give you a euphemism. I'm trying to say it, put it in a way that's not so, jarring. But he said no. But death doesn't mean, you do know that the word for cemetery comes from a word that means sleep. The idea that people know we are not going to sleep for thousands of years until Jesus comes back. To be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. Now, there are those who believe that we go to some intermediate state, and they would point out to us the story of the rich man and Lazarus. Now the Lazarus who had suffered in this life was then taken to be by Abraham's side. Good King James, he went to be at Abraham's bosom, but basically he was there by Abraham's side. The rich man was tormented in a flame. And a lot of people say this shows that there is an intermediate state where people go and they're being, in fact, some people would say that paradise is that good part of the intermediate state. And I will grant to some people that probably has been taught through the church, through centuries, that there's going to be, and I would also believe that even though we go to be with Jesus now, once he comes to begin to rule on earth, and once everybody's body has been resurrected, and once our bodies have been restored, our spirits have been, and we're joined together, there's going to be a new level of enjoyment in heaven. But I don't want to ever think that somebody is somewhere waiting in kind of a never, grayish, hazy, gloomy type of thing that they're waiting for Jesus to come. No, we go to wherever Jesus is. Where do we go when we die? We go to be with Jesus. We are with him. Where's Jesus? When Stephen died, he saw Jesus at the right hand of God. If you go to the book of Revelation, it says Jesus is the Lamb right there at the throne, unsealing the seals that are there. We go to be with Jesus. But understand this, God at one point in time is going to destroy the heavens and the earth, and it's all going to be resurrected. Not just our bodies are going to be resurrected, the whole creation is going to die, and it's all going to be resurrected. And there's going to be a new heavens and a new earth. So we are with Jesus. We are in God's glory now. But there's going to be a new heaven and a new earth one day that's going to be even more glorious than what people are enjoying now. But what about those who don't know Jesus? We're going to discuss hell one of these days. But if the story of the rich man and Lazarus teaches anything, is they're not waiting for their sentence to begin. It's already going on. It's already going on. I like the guy who I was reading this week who was comparing what happens to us when we die, particularly for the unbelievers, to what happens to a guy who's arrested and charged with a crime. Usually gets taken to jail, right? And by the way, if you're in a third world country and you're suspected of a crime, they just go arrest you and hold you till they can find the evidence. They don't worry about that. And I think that may be, we're so accustomed to people, being able to get out on bail and being released and things like this. No, you go to jail, but jail's not prison, is it? Just like there's another greater, more wonderful stage of heaven to come, there's another stage, more awful, of hell to come. That rich man who was being tormented in the flame didn't know that someday it was going to get worse. When a man dies, where is he? He's still alive. He's still alive. And either he's with Jesus or he has been banished, exiled. Either he enjoys all the blessings that God can invent or all the punishment, which we'll get into. Where's our joy, our daughter? She's with Jesus. She's still joy. Moses and Elijah showed up to talk to Jesus about his departure, what was going to happen. Were Moses and Elijah aware of what was going on earth? Yep, they were. Even the rich man in hell realized that his brothers were still alive. They still know. We should let people know. I don't see how anybody can say, well, we can't know, what lies beyond the curtain of death, we don't know. Because Jesus has been there and come back. And that's the reason he can say, I am the way. I wanted to include what Job said in a later chapter. And since you guys have studied Job in Sunday school recently, y'all know all these things, but in chapter 19 and verse 25, he says, I know that my Redeemer lives, and he shall stand at last on the earth. And after my skin is destroyed, this I know, that in my flesh I will see God. I know that my Redeemer lives. We can know that. Father, I pray today that we will rest in these words. Father, may they give us the wisdom and the comfort and the courage that we need, not only to live life meaningfully and purposefully and for your glory, but also then, Father, to help others to know that they can know and be prepared. Father, may we realize all that you've done for us, the victory that you've won for us, so that now we don't have to be afraid of death's sting. We don't have to worry that death will be victorious because you've overcome. You are the victor. And in you we are more than conquerors. We can overcome. Thank you, Father, that you've not left us in the dark. But just as surely as Jesus came the first time, he will come again, either to take us in death or to come with the archangels to declare the end of history. Father, thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.